It's the standard thing to say Colin needs no introduction, but I'm going to give you an introduction anyway. So Colin will be leaving his role as the medical director of the GMC in June, I believe, Colin? Having been the head of department of, or director rather, of education and standards since 2017, and subsequently the MD. By training is an intensivist, so has wide knowledge of critical care, is an honorary professor of medical education at the University of Manchester, and in a previous existence was also the head of the Lancaster Medical School. I will do no more introductions. Colin, the floor is yours. Thank you.
I just thought, because we're a little bit pressed for time, I'm going to split this into two parts, because the risk here is that in reflecting on what we said, I just repeat what you've said. And I don't think that's necessarily helpful. So I thought what I would do is give you some brief reflections, and then maybe just push that challenge a little bit further from earlier. And I'm nearest the door, so I'll probably be all right. So, so my first comment is, it's really good to see such a fantastic group of people together. It's always hard, isn't it, in meetings like this to get representation. But I think that people have worked really hard to that, and it's great to have Derek here from employers, but we've got from all 4 countries, we've got different colleges, federation, etc., etc. That's a real plus. And for me, that's great, because it means we're hearing those voices. At the beginning of this afternoon, Steve Power said that we're in for a time of change, and I don't think he was just referring to England, although, you know, that was quite a move, wasn't it? We're going to downsize on Monday to capsize on Thursday. I thought that was quite interesting. But we are in a time of change, and there's lots of it. And whether we look at that through the lens of medicine itself and the way it's progressing, whether we look at the distribution of disease and the disease profile, I was thinking back to when I was a medical student, stuff I learned then is probably not applicable now, although some of it's recurrent. And against that, we're also in a big kind of society, I'm going to call it a societal change or a societal evolution, where things that when some of us were much younger are not seen in the same way. So even if I said to you, for example, I think it's probably fair to say that many of us as doctors who are older lived to work, but actually people want to work to live. And that's actually quite important, that whole question of work-life balance. There's a difference. And that's not saying one is right and one is wrong, it's saying it's different. And we need to be aware of that. I don't know where I've got to in my numbers. I was going to say my second point, but it probably isn't. I think that and I would say this, wouldn't I, but I think the GMC standards have stood the test of time. So if you think about what we have, we've got promoting excellence, we've got excellence by design, and then we've got a QA process with sanctions, and we've got NTS. So that framework, I think, has been quite useful. So I just want to ask you a question. Is there anyone in this room who doesn't believe we should be led by the data? That's good. Wait till later. And so I think there was an interesting point I think came up in that last part. How do we effectively share good practice? When we used to do regional visits for QA visits, and some of you may have been part of teams that did that, we would always publish the reports that included good practice. Do you know who read them? The organisations about which the good practice. No one else bothered. No other region read when Bill Irish in the East got a good report for, I think he did anyway, got a good report for the East of England. I won't talk about the South West, Jeff, you're all right. So I think there's a real challenge. If we believe that we want to raise the floor, not lower the ceiling, and I agree with that, by the way, then we have to think about, so how are we, and are we willing to listen to the good practice of, well, that's all right, because that works in Imperial, but it can't possibly work in King's. Other trusts are available. And so I think it is good then to see that the quality criteria adapted and applied to thinking about, so what does that mean for IMT? Good that you've got it done, but we're going to change them. Or rather, I think the important point is to say that no standards are, should exist in perpetuity. And one of the things through some work that we're doing, which is aligned with what a lot of other people are doing and what we've called future education. One of the things we will be looking at is, are those standards set out in those documents still applicable? Should they be reviewed? And there will be a formal process for that. Don't worry, we won't just drop that onto your email accounts. Really good to hear about quality. So I wrote down here, quality, yes please, but can we measure it in numbers? It's really weird, isn't it, how when you talk about quality, often it goes, so how many do I need to do? I'm also really good about consistency. Yes, please, but does it mean the same thing for everybody in this room? Consistency of what? And those points came out. And indeed, are we measuring the things that matter, or are we measuring the things we can measure? Because that's often what we do, isn't it? Well, I can't measure that, so I'll measure this. And that drives behaviours, understandably, but it doesn't necessarily get us to where we want. And in the consistency and quality point, what's its purpose? Yes, it's for training, but ultimately it should be for the people, the patients that we serve. I don't think anyone would disagree with that, but sometimes we just need to be reminded that everything we do through the lens of medicine is not for ourselves. It is for the communities and the people that we serve. And I think there were comments therefore about parity of esteem and consistency of opportunity, which I thought were good points. And then it wasn't mentioned, but it just sort of struck me that one of the things we're interested in is a broader competence, and what we mean by someone who is competent, and how do we measure that? And I wondered whether a high degree of competence is a measure of quality, or whether those two things are different. And I'm not posing questions in order for you to have the right to answer, by the way. These are takeaway questions. And then linked to that whole training process, a little bit of comments about what can we learn from the idea of apprenticeship? Not saying that it's either or, but what can we learn from it in moving forward? Very clear story about the fact that support for training is best delivered through support for trainers. But what are the attributes of a trainer? And is it based on seniority? And if so, how senior? Because I think there's a piece of history, so let me get this straight. There's nothing in the GMC rubric which requires an educational supervisor to be a consultant. But I hear it all, I know you can't, the GMC says. So there is something about making sure we get the right messages out there. So it is about being capable and trained to do the role rather than the seniority. And in fact, I'd go a little bit further and say the most senior people don't necessarily make the best leaders. I say that carefully, but think about it. There are some brilliant people who are not necessarily senior. Seniority in a department is often used as the method to select the next departmental chair, whatever the language is. Doesn't necessarily follow. And it's true in academia as well, by the way. So there's very clear evidence that educators enjoy it, but they're busier than their peers. And the GMC data shows that they're also more at risk of burnout. So there is a driver here. That's the data. What are we going to do about it? Is there more that we, as doctors, can do with employers, Derek was saying earlier, so that they can assist in helping us shape the way the service is delivered to maximise the opportunity for training and also meet patient need? I just wonder whether we've got a bit of a disconnect in how we do that. For what it's worth, I spent the whole of my career all the way through to middle of my consultant time being the rota coordinator. It does mean you have to take the bad lot, but it also means that you get a sense of how the department is working. Now, I know the world is a different place, but it's just something to bear in mind. But I think working with employers to say, how can we collectively work together to maximise opportunity could be better. And then finally, on reflections, there was some mention of mentorship. It's interesting, for those of you familiar with DMEC conference, I think in every conference, I always get asked to say something. And I looked back, I've never changed what I've said. Whoever you are, you need a mentor. Doesn't matter how senior you are, a mentor is an important person. And if you are a more experienced person, you should be offering to mentor those who are coming behind you. I think that's a very powerful thing that maybe the way the healthcare delivery is designed now makes that more difficult. But I think it's a really important part. So here's my challenge. Mike's got his pen out. How willing are we to change? What if I gave you a blank piece of paper and said, on this blank piece of paper, you have the opportunity to design the career future for health, so doctors and other professionals, that delivers the best care for patients. I wonder whether it would look like what we've got now, or whether we would look at something else. And that leads me to a thinking about, are we so fragmented in the way that we do things? So if you think about who's invested in this, we'll just look at who's in the room for a start. Employers, colleges, the regulator, education bodies. We've got 4 countries, resident doctors. Oh, sorry, I missed out patients and the public. They all have a view. But we haven't, I don't think, been particularly good at what I think people would call system leadership. How do we think about the bigger picture rather than the me or my-ology? And I think that that's an interesting thing. And I was just reflecting, so where does the decision come from? So you might argue, in the context of England, DH have decided that the health secretary should make all the decisions. Well, that's fine, but he can't actually do that without the willingness and support of an awful lot of other people. That's where the system leadership needs to come from. And actually, even if you look at it in terms of education structures, I was just listening to the words people use, because I know that they change a bit. So we've got PG deans, heads of schools. Do we still have regional education advisors? Maybe we do. TPDs, DMEs, education, clinical. We have a panoply of people who've all got a bit of this pie. Have we genuinely agreed how we can work together better for the benefit of the patients? Or, if I go to the system, there's a group called UK MERG. Could be UK MERG, UK Medical Education Reference Group. It has the 4 departments, the 4 education bodies. Yeah, and that's it. And then I'm pleased that we've got a meeting that has the 4 education bodies, Jeanette for the Academy and the GMC. But we're not together, the system. So we've got these multiple little groups, and sometimes big groups, some with quite a lot of power and authority. But we haven't worked out together how to do it. And I think there was a point made, I think from the front, by one of our resident colleagues, resident doctor colleagues. You know, they're not out of this. We need to find a way to do it together. And are we those sorts of people who go, yeah, no, that's really important. Yeah, but it's too difficult. And so then we don't do anything. I remember when I was at Warwick, that was somewhere else I worked. When I was at Warwick Medical School, we decided to introduce a new curriculum. And you'll have had it with IMT. I remember all the conversations, because you have transition, don't you? You have people who are in the current system and people coming onto the new, and somehow you have to manage that change. That's when it gets tricky. We didn't do it very well. We ended up with 2-year groups, both meant to be doing paediatrics at the same time. Kind of doesn't work. But then you end up with saying, oh, no, let's just leave it alone. I think our challenge has to be something about our willingness to actually think differently, do differently. Maybe it does need to be disruptive. So how could we design medical careers to better align with health needs? What are the health needs of the community in which you live and work? So where you work, what do you know about the wider community and its health needs as opposed to your specialty? Because I've sat in, and I can think back now, and I'm guilty. I can think of meetings where you argue for your specialty. Every college wants 1,000 more consultants in their specialty. I have no idea whether that's right or wrong. But when we look at the communities in which we work, we should be making a contribution to better the health of the community, not for my specialty, because of course I'm great and I'm an international expert and I should be having more clinics and more money and etc. So I think that's a real challenge for us if we're serious about delivering health to the communities. And that takes me back to the, you know how lawyers lead the witness. So my apologies for doing this to you. If we want to be data-led, we know that there are demographic inequalities. We know that there are health inequalities. We know that there is a mismatch of the distribution of doctors to population health need. And currently, we are not fixing it. Thank you.